All right, so here we are going to be talking about order of operations. And for the most part, order of operations is just really about practice. So I'm going to show you a bunch of problems, but before I do that, I want to just talk about PEMDAS and using that kind of as your checklist. You might have also heard this as GEMDAS. And I'll talk about what that G versus what the P means. But really, the first thing and only thing I want to talk about before I get into practice problems is that multiplication and division are on the same level of PEMDAS, on order of operations. You really just follow this from left to right, just like you read a sentence. If you have to decide between multiplication and division, you do the one that's on the left side first, then you work your way across to the right, and the same thing applies to addition and subtraction. They're on the same level, they have the same priority in order of operations, so you just work straight across the problem if those are the two things that you're deciding between. All right, so in this first problem, actually one of the grouping symbols that's implied beyond parentheses is this fraction bar. There are kind of invisible parentheses around the top and the bottom, saying that you should do everything on the top and everything on the bottom separately, and then you divide those two numbers. So I'm going to just treat this as its own order of operation problem and solve that by itself. And then on the bottom, really, there's just the one operation that will turn into a -2. Make sure you're doing this in the right order. That is a really common mistake, to do 6 minus 4 instead of 4 minus 6. That will be -2 on the bottom of this fraction. On the top, I have to decide between adding and multiplying. So I'm going to do that multiplying first. That comes first in this list of order of operations. I don't have any parentheses really, or at least I have nothing to do inside of there. I do have a set of parentheses, but it's just implying that I'm multiplying the number on the outside times the number on the inside, but there's nothing to actually do inside of there. There's no exponents, so I have to decide between multiplication and addition. I'll do that multiplication first. That gives me -20. When I do this, I'm multiplying a +4 times a -5. That turns into a -20. A -20 and subtracting 20 are really the exact same operation. You need to get in the habit of thinking about it that way. This operation, this adding whatever comes out from this, is the exact same thing as just subtracting that 20. So this turns into -8. I'm going to do that subtraction. That's -8. And a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So the final answer there would be a +4. All right, moving right along to that second problem. So again, I'm going to actually just write down PEMDAS on the side of the page just to use that as a checklist. So I want to start inside the parentheses. So I have operations to do inside of there. And inside of there, I actually want to think about PEMDAS again. I want to think about, I have subtraction here, and I have an exponent. Exponents come before subtraction. So I'm going to do that exponent as my very first step. I'm going to work inside the parentheses and follow PEMDAS inside of there. I'm not going to change anything else about this problem except for that one operation. So I'm going to square this 2. I'm subtracting whatever that comes out as, and that comes out as a 4. I haven't finished inside the parentheses, so actually I'm going to finish that next. So I'm going to write -10 minus 12 divided by 2 times whatever comes out from that, which is just 4. It's important that you keep this set of parentheses there until you actually use that operation. That operation is an implied multiplication that we have not done yet. All right, so now I took care of everything inside the parentheses. I do not have any exponents left. I have multiplication and division. Actually, this is an important step here. I have multiplication here. I have division here. When I have both of those, and I'm just trying to decide between those two, I have to work left to right. Just like you read a sentence straight across, I'm going to start with this first. And I'm always going to include this sign, the sign in front of the number, with that operation. This is a -12 that gets divided by a +2. That comes out as a -6. And this operation is still intact. That's still multiplication there. I change this into what I'm going to call a -6 or -6. Those are really the exact same thing in this case. So I took care of my division. Now I have a subtraction and a multiplication symbol to decide between, which means I'm going to do this multiplication. And again, I'm really attaching this sign with the number. That's a -6 times a +4, which gives me a -24. So I'm going to keep that sign the same. Whatever sign comes out from there, that's the sign I now write in between these two numbers. This is -10 is still a -10, and that -24, or minus 24 gets rewritten after that negative 10. So you might be thinking that that's a subtracting 24 and I call it a negative 24, but I want to rewrite this and it's the exact same thing. I could rewrite this as negative 24 minus 10. These are identical. Those are the exact same operation. Either way, you'd get negative 34 from that operation. So you could see it as subtracting 24, which is what you're seeing there, or negative 24. You could also see what's happening to this negative 10. That's moving to the back as a minus 10. But it's important that you don't double up the operation. When you get a negative 24 from this, don't use subtracting negative 24. It's just that number, whatever number that is, getting rewritten in place of the multiplication problem that you had before. All right, I'm going to write that PEMDAS down again. And I'm going to think about anything I can do inside the parentheses. There's really nothing to do in there. It's just a negative 3. That's as simple as that gets. So I'm going to move on to my exponents. I have 2 of them. I'm going to move from left to right here, although here it actually doesn't matter too much. This negative 3 outside of parentheses versus this negative 3 inside of parentheses, actually that is a huge distinction there. This is saying that negative sign will come down no matter what. If there's no parentheses around the negative sign, it always comes down with a problem. We change the number that we get from this into a negative, which is a negative 9. Nothing about this negative 3 changed. This negative 3, I'm also going to do this in the same step. Negative 3 cubed means negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. I'm not including this negative sign when I square this. I am including this negative sign when I cube this because this is in parentheses. That's implying that the whole thing gets raised to that exponent. So negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 is a negative 27. I still haven't really used this operation of multiplication, so I'm going to keep the parentheses around that. Now I have what could be seen as subtraction and that multiplication. So I'm going to do my multiplication next. I did all my exponents. Now I'm taking care of multiplication. Negative 3 times negative 27 is a positive 81. That came out as a positive 81, so this sign will change to a plus 81. That negative 9 comes down. So now I have negative 9 plus 81. That equals a positive 72 for my final answer.